As as you all know, the ongoing public health crisis has forced Marion County students to learn remotely during and throughout much of 2020. However, we have never forgotten that around one out of every four students in Marion County lacks the high-speed internet access that is necessary for e-learning. The city has supported temporary efforts to relieve the gap. Last month saw the extension of the Mind Trust's Community Learning Sites program. It's a valuable program and a very successful program. But the truth is that the effort that has been made by the Mind Trust would not be sustainable over the long term. So that's why today I am very excited to participate in the announcement of a new $1.7 million pilot program that will help students in 6 Marion County schools access high-speed internet in their homes. The Marion County Dedicated Network Pilot will launch in February next year. That's 2021. If all goes well, stakeholders will move forward to implement this network county-wide, which may very well be available as early as 2022. Now, the city is supporting this pilot with $730,000 from our Federal CARES Act appropriation. And we are pleased and proud to be joined by the following partners. The Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation is contributing $500,000. The Lilly Endowment Inc. is contributing $330,000. And the Indiana 5G Zone is contributing $100,000. These philanthropic contributions are being made to the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership Foundation. This pilot would not have been possible without the leadership of the Indianapolis eLearning Fund, which is a coalition of public and private partners tackling the connectivity needs of Indianapolis students. So my thanks to all of our partners. Today, we are helping students make the very most of their education during this difficult time. So now, to share more about the challenges the network aims to address, I'm also pleased to introduce the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation's president and CEO, Claire Fittian-Green. Claire?
Thank you so much, Mayor. Thank you for your strong leadership and partnership on this effort. And a huge thanks to all of the many dedicated community organizations that have supported the Indianapolis eLearning Fund alongside us at the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation. A special recognition to the Eli Lilly and Company Foundation, the Lilly Endowment, the Mind Trust, and United Way of Central Indiana, along with many others. Together, we established the Indianapolis eLearning Fund in April, less than 4 weeks after schools initially closed, to help slow the spread of COVID-19. Early on, we assessed students' ability to access e-learning in light of the new remote learning reality, and what we found was troubling. A quarter of students across Marion County's 11 districts and roughly 50 public charter schools lack high-speed internet access at home. That translates into 38,000 students out of 152,000. This is problematic because even under the best of circumstances, e-learning makes it difficult for students to advance academically. A recent McKinsey & Company study on learning loss due to COVID-19 estimates that even if students return to school full-time in person in January 2021, they could lose anywhere between 3 and 11 months of learning if they receive average to low quality instruction. These losses are compounded by lack of internet access and could have long-term implications on everything from students' risk of dropping out to our nation's gross domestic product. The Indianapolis eLearning Fund has sought to close the gap in internet connectivity by distributing mobile hotspots to families prior to the current school year, but we know this is only a temporary solution. To fully bridge the digital divide, we need to ensure that every student in a Marion County public school can participate in e-learning, even after the pandemic is behind us. The Marion County Dedicated Network Pilot marks a key step to that end. By piloting the network at 6 schools, we'll be able to test run the technology, paving the way for broader expansion countywide. The pilot phase also will provide ample time and the experience needed to develop the right governance structure to oversee the network. We're committed to moving with urgency while also getting things right, and we're really pleased to have 2 trusted nonprofits, Energy Systems Network and the Indiana 5G Zone, as our partners in this endeavor. To explain how the network pilot will work, I would like to introduce Paul Mitchell, President and CEO of Energy Systems Network.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you to Mayor Hogsett. I want to thank the City of Indianapolis, the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation, the Lilly Endowment, and of course our partners at the Indiana 5G Zone for contributing the funding to make this pilot possible. I'm President and CEO of Energy Systems Network. We're an initiative of the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership. And at ESN, we focus on developing and implementing innovative technology pilot projects to solve real world problems. And I can tell you there is no problem that is more real than the lack of access to internet connectivity for students across Marion County who need it now for e-learning and are going to need it in the future for addressing the homework gap. We're excited to partner with the Indiana 5G Zone to implement this Marion County dedicated network pilot. And we will also be collaborating with our commercial partner, SBA Corporation, who will provide the network infrastructure and services to make this pilot work. The pilot project is going to be launched at 6 area schools. These include George Washington High School within the Indianapolis Public School District, Harrison Hill Elementary School in Lawrence Township, Southport Elementary School and Winchester Village Elementary School in Perry Township, and 2 public charter schools, Riverside High School and Vision Academy. We chose these schools based on geographic distribution and also feasibility through a study that was conducted in the fall. In addition to the K-12 schools, Ivy Tech Community College's Indianapolis campus will also be a part of the pilot. This will allow us to expand the network further into the Riverside and Fall Creek neighborhoods while also testing a different use of the network among community college students. Testing different use cases for the network is important because it's possible that it will require beyond K-12 users to be sustainable in the long term. In terms of capacity, this network will be able to serve up to 1,500 Wi-Fi hotspots and 2,000 video call users. So among that user base, we will distribute them throughout the various schools that will participate in the network. SBA Corporation is going to be deploying this network utilizing a new cutting-edge network design known as Citizens Broadband Radio Service, or CBRS. CBRS has been used in the past by rural internet service providers to enhance broadband connectivity, and is now being considered by communities across the country for similar e-learning pilots. The initial run of this network will run through September 2021, and after that, the partners will determine whether it makes sense to scale it to countywide capacity, and we are hopeful that is the outcome we can achieve. This pilot marks not only an important step in increasing internet access, but also in advancing educational equity, which is a critical goal among Indianapolis leaders. To talk more about the equity impact, I'm proud to introduce Jeffrey Harrison, President and CEO of Citizens Energy Group, who is chairing the Business Equity for Indy Committee. Jeffrey?
Thanks so much, Paul. I'm pleased to be a part of announcing this network pilot, which, as you mentioned, is really an important initiative towards bridging looming gaps in educational equity based on race and class. I'm proud to chair a recently launched committee called Business Equity for Indy, which seeks to create a more inclusive economy here in Central Indiana. We recently created a handful of task forces, including one on learning and talent opportunities, which is focused squarely on creating a more level playing field for students of color when it comes to educational access and the ability to grow one's talent and skills. As we all know, Indiana, like many other states, suffers from gaps in access to e-learning, and these gaps disproportionately impact students of color. A study released earlier this year by the Alliance for Excellent Education found that nationally, 31% of Black and Latinx students lack high-speed internet access at home compared to 21% of their white peers. Launching this network pilot marks a key step in bridging the digital divide in our own community and paving the way for a countywide network so that all public school students in Marion County can have access e-learning, which will be an ongoing reality even after the dangers of COVID-19 become less acute. I'm grateful to Claire Fittian-Green of the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation, who spoke earlier today, and Dr. Adrian Sims, Vice President of Talent Management at One America, for co-chairing the Business Equity for Indy Committee's Learning and Talent Opportunities Task Force. This pilot is one example of the types of efforts that the task force will pursue to, again, help create a city where all students have equal access to a high-quality education. I would now like to introduce Alicia Johnson, Superintendent of Indianapolis Public Schools, to talk about how this pilot can assist IPS students.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. Good morning, everyone. I want to say thanks so much to Mayor Hogsett, the City of Indianapolis, the Fairbanks Foundation, and other partners who are making this really important pilot a reality today. At Indianapolis Public Schools, a school district where more than 70% of our students are African American or Latinx, we have made racial equity both an organizational value and one of our 4 key priorities for our 2025 strategic plan. And when COVID hit in March and schools across the country were forced to close to in-person learning and shift to alternate learning platforms, we saw the full impact of racial disparities fully exposed in a very distressing way across our country. And IPS was no exception to that. Many of our families were and have been and continue to be disproportionately impacted in a number of ways. And most notably, as others have mentioned, the digital divide grew even wider. We gave surveys last spring that showed that more than 30% of our families did not have reliable access to technology or internet service at home. And in part, due to a lack of access, our district was initially forced to launch a home learning plan that relied on pencil and paper packets that we mailed to thousands of households, over 200,000 pieces of paper, before we were eventually able to deploy our district's available computers to our middle and high school students so that they could continue to earn credits for graduation in their education. So that gave a portion of our students access to remote learning while still leaving many of our students at a disadvantage compared to a number of neighboring districts. Now, thanks to a $17 million investment that our district has made, we are a one-to-one district, meaning that every student has a device to access. And for families who don't have internet service, we've worked to provide mobile hotspot devices to them. To date, more than 6,000 of those devices have been supplied to our families. And while we are very happy and grateful to be able to provide the access to that service, the reality is that those dollars could be spent deepening the base of teaching in the remote learning environment in other ways that we could support our students and families. That is why, as others have said, it is so critical that we find a more sustainable way to support internet access so that school districts don't have to continue to shoulder this gap for our children. So I'm incredibly grateful. Our district is grateful for this opportunity and for the possibilities that this could open up toward a long-term solution to bridging this gap. So thank you to all the work that has been done and all the work that will continue to be done on behalf of our students and our families.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson, and thank you to all of our speakers. We'll now move to the question and answer portion of the press conference. As always, the reporters can fill in their name and outlet in the question and answer, and I will call on you one by one. First up is Eric Berman of WIBC.
Hi, thanks, Mark. Several of you mentioned this, but I think I'm going to direct this to Dr. Johnson. What is the importance of this after the pandemic is over and things are back to quote unquote normal? Everyone has noted over the last several months that it's important for kids to be in school, that's a better environment. So what's the future of this after things are returned to normal?
Sure, it's a great question. I think the reality is we knew there was a digital divide before COVID-19. What COVID did is just really lay bare how significant and substantial that divide is. Our students and families need access to the internet before, and they'll continue to need it afterwards for assignments that they're completing at home, for access to college applications, filling out financial aid, job applications. So the need to have immediate, readily available access to the internet will still be just as prevalent after we are through this pandemic, really as it was before. And now we have in place potentially a structure that can support our families and our students in meaningful ways.
Excellent, thank you. Was there anybody else who wanted to jump in on that? All right, sounds good. Next is Sierra Hignite of Wish TV.
Hi, so I know that in the stats it says that the current network when you first launch can support 1,500 hotspots. Do we know how many hotspots will be in the initial launch in February? Is it the 1,500? And then also in September, if everyone decides to move forward and launch this countywide, how many students will need hotspots then after the initial launch?
Mark, I would like to direct that to Paul, please.
Sure. So the goal is to have the network live at all of the pilot sites in the February timeframe, construction and weather permitting, so that students, as they go back to school, will be able to, from their holiday breaks, will be able to utilize this network as quickly as possible. I do expect that the full 1,500 hotspots will be deployed pretty much at the very launch of the network. To answer the second part of your question, how many hotspots would be needed, how many students would be participating in the network going forward. When we looked at the studies and the analysis, the surveys that were done, it was anywhere from 30,000 kind of on the low end to probably as much as 40, maybe even 50,000 students that could benefit from this type of a network. If you think about who either doesn't have access to high-speed internet or has very limited access to high-speed internet. In terms of whether or not all of those 30 to 50,000 students would require a hotspot, a lot of that depends on whether or not students are living in a home with their brothers or sisters who are also students. So one hotspot can serve more than one person in a home. So usually it's not a one-to-one ratio. So you would be looking at certainly several tens of thousands of hotspots that would be deployed as part of the network in the future.
Thanks, Paul. Next up is Eric Weddle.
Yes, thank you. I was just trying to understand some of the technical parts of this. What is the network, I guess, for one, that the students will be accessing? I mean, it's like a Verizon network, AT&T, and then does it matter where they are in the county, since a lot of these students may attend Riverside or Washington, but they won't be living near those schools?
That's probably me again. So yes, so this network is essentially a private network. So it's not a commercial carrier's network from an AT&T or a Verizon or a T-Mobile. It's a private network that will run on a portion of the spectrum that has been made available by the FCC called CBRS. I spoke to that earlier, and we can certainly send you more information on that. The network itself for the pilot phase is limited in its reach. We're essentially going to be installing antennas on the schools that I mentioned on their roofs, and those antennas will connect into the fiber that already exists within those schools, and that will create the network. Typically, those antennas can reach about 2-mile radius around the school where they're placed. So the students who will participate in the pilot will need to live relatively close to the schools themselves. In the Riverside and kind of Fall Creek neighborhood, because we have a clustering of schools that are participating, we will have a mesh network effect where more families, more students that live in that neighborhood will be within the coverage zone of the various antennas located on schools in that geography. So it is a limited reach in this pilot phase. The goal being, if the technology proves out to work well and it's highly cost effective, which we believe it is, and you were to scale this countywide, then it wouldn't matter where a student lives. They would be able to access the internet really anywhere, whether they were in their home, whether they were at a park, they were at their grandparents' house or a friend's house. It would be truly a countywide network, not unlike the kind of commercial networks that we use from commercial carriers.
Thanks, Paul. Next up is Erica Washington of Chalkbeat, Indiana.
Hello. I know that you said that there'll be 1,500 Wi-Fi hotspots in the initial launch. And so I just wanted to clarify, does that mean that there'll be 1,500 students in total that will have access in this pilot program? Or, yeah, so my question is, how many students will be affected with this pilot program?
We think it'll be more than 1,500 students because of the fact that a hotspot can typically serve multiple students in a household. And so as we're selecting the students that will be part of the pilot, there certainly may be a student that doesn't have a brother or sister that lives in the household, so it would be one hotspot for one student. But in many cases, you have families that have multiple school-age children, and those children would all be able to benefit from that hotspot in the home. So our target number of participants will be in that 2,000, maybe to 2,500 range.
Our next question is from Erica Herron of Indy Star.
Thank you. So a couple of questions. So I'm sorry, I'm sure I'm completely understanding. So is it only students with the hotspot that can access the network during this pilot phase? And then once it goes countywide, if it does, would there be an opportunity for this to be available to kind of anyone in the county? And then also if it goes countywide, do you have any estimate of like what the cost of that would be?
Paul, again, I think you're probably best suited to answer those initial questions.
Okay. So the first question is, would you need to have a hotspot to access the internet through this network during the pilot phase? The answer is yes, you would need to have a hotspot. Longer term, though, if you were to go to a countywide solution, many of the devices that we use today, our cell phones, our laptops, iPads, Chromebooks, including the devices that the schools are procuring, are going to be able to connect to this CBRS signal that we're utilizing without needing a hotspot to act as an intermediary. When we get to that point, and that could be as soon as 2022 and beyond, the network would be accessible just from your phone or from your laptop or your iPad, and that's a future that we're planning for. You asked the question of, who would be able to access the network in the future if it was countywide. That will really depend on the user base that we're targeting. Clearly, the focus is on K through 12 students for e-learning and closing the homework gap. It really is going to be secure login. So if that login is provided to a student from the school, they're able to log on and utilize that network. If we were to expand the user base to, say, allow parents to use that same internet access for workforce development or telehealth, or accessing government services over the internet, that would be a decision that would be made, and those use cases could be allowed on the network. So it's really going to be a governance decision about how many users and what types of users are allowed to access the network. In terms of the cost of the network, we believe this will likely require a kind of public-private partnership in which a private company would be the one that would make the capital investment to deploy the network countywide. And we've seen estimates that are in the tens of millions of dollars to make that kind of a countywide investment. And then the user base would have a fee for accessing that network. We are certainly looking at different funding sources for long-term sustainability. One source that is clearly being looked at very closely is federal dollars that come to schools today through the FCC called E-rate funds. And that would certainly be one source of long-term sustainable funding to support this type of network.
Thanks, Paul. Our next question is from Alyssa Donovan.
Yes, I was just wondering, so are the current hotspots that were distributed to students, are they not working at all, or are they just not very dependable?
I'm happy to take that one. They're working. So most districts and schools across Marion County have distributed at the hotspots for students to be able to access their learning during the day. So they're working. I think long term, though, if you think about sort of the scalability and the sustainability of these kind of one-off ways to solve for the gap that we see right now, it makes more sense to try to find a more sustainable long-term solution that is comprehensive and it can include schools across our county. And so that's what we're really trying to work toward.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson. Next question is from Russ Dodge of WITT.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I like the scope of this program, but could you discuss that will be available for the users on this program?
Russ, I think we might have missed part of your question. Can you say it again?
Sure. Yeah, I like the scope of this program, but could you explain a little bit about the IT and technical support that is going to be available for the users in the program?
Sure, I can address that. So the goal for this is to make it as seamless for the users as possible. Many of them are going to have an existing hotspot that was deployed earlier from a traditional commercial carrier, and we're really just switching that hotspot out to test out this new private network. So their user experience of having used hotspots shouldn't change. If they do have a challenge or need assistance, there'll be a 1-800 number that will be staffed by SBA Corporation that can address those questions. And there will also be technical support teams here on the ground in Marion County representing SBA Corporation that understands the hardware and the software and whatnot. If there's real troubleshooting, then those folks can step in and provide that technical assistance.
And Paul, I'll just add that we have been closely assisted by the Chief Technology and Information Officers at each of the districts and schools in Marion County. They've been partners from the very beginning. They've long identified the homework gap, and of course, COVID-19 has made that much clearer to all of us, as Superintendent Johnson said earlier. So additionally, the staff within each school for this pilot program will also be able to provide some support.
Thank you. Looks like we have a follow-up from Erica Herron.
Oh, I was just wondering on the access fee that you talked about for if it goes countywide, who would be paying that? Would that be like the schools themselves, the school districts, or would that be passed down in some cases to actual students and families?
So I think for the K through 12 use case, I think the expectation or the hope would be that it would be funded through school funding, again, with the likely source of that funding being federal dollars that flow through to the schools to help cover internet and technology expenses. We certainly wouldn't rule out anything. There's always a possibility that there could be some, sharing of those user fees among individual users in the schools, but the expectation is most likely that it would be paid for by the schools themselves through that federal funding and potentially through additional philanthropic or other grant funds the schools would receive.
All right, it looks like that was our last question. Well, thank you again, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I spoke too soon. Real quick, Erica Washington, another follow-up question.
Yes, follow-up question. Thank you so much. I'm really curious about this. So with the video call access, would the students be getting the Wi-Fi access and the video call user access? I was confused about that.
Yeah, I apologize for that. Really, the only meaning of saying 1,500 hotspots and 2,000 video calls could be supported is that you could have more than one video call using the same hotspot. That's what that really is saying. So a video call is something that is just done using that hotspot. The hotspot takes the signal that it's receiving from the network and essentially converts it to a Wi-Fi signal so that it can be used on the end user's device, their Chromebook or their iPad. And it's through that Chromebook or iPad that they would, participate in a Zoom call or a video call like the one we're on for their class. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks to our panelists for volunteering their time today. There will be a press release sent as soon as this is done, and will be available for any follow-up questions over email. Thanks so much.